Well, welcome everybody. We're awfully glad to get you back in here for our very first session of the NSF Spring Summit. And what a great session it's going to prove to be as we get a chance to sit down with an amazing leader and a figurehead in our industry, who I will introduce in just a second. But let me tee up the organization first by saying that, in an industry that is dominated by letters, NBA, NFL, MLB, MLS, NHL, and so forth, there in this exists three other letters that interweave them all, and that's CAA, or more specifically, CAA Sports. So from representing athletes and coaches to building world-class stadiums and arenas, it's safe to say that CAA Sports has its hand in just about every pot there is in the sports business. So it's a special pleasure to have with us this morning as we kick off the NSF Spring Summit, Howie Nuchow, the co-head of CAA Sports, is our special guest for the NSF Spring Summit's Fireside Chat. So welcome, Howie. But now almost all of us are familiar with creative artists, or CAA as they're commonly known, in some capacity. And for many of us, when we think of CAA, we immediately think of artist and talent representation. And you wouldn't be wrong. They certainly do that. In fact, you'd be really hard-pressed to find another agency that can stack up with the clients and artists that they represent, be that in music, theater, authors, movies, television, and certainly in sports, you name it. So it is perhaps only natural that back in 2007, CAA branched into the one entertainment area that they didn't work in at that time, and that was sports. But as we'll soon start diving into, they didn't just dip their toes into the sports industry water. They actually jumped right into the deep end, to a point now where CAA Sports has their hands involved in the following: athlete representation, which we just talked about, coach representation, their CAA's property sales division, CAA's brand consulting division, the sports media advisory, and last but not least, CAA Icon. So whether it's football, basketball, or even esports, if you're hands-on watching a sporting event out there, there's a very good chance that CAA Sports not only represents many of the athletes that you're watching, but that they ran point on building the arena or stadium that you're sitting in, or they negotiated the naming rights on the building. And if you're watching the game from home, then there's an excellent chance that CAA Sports will have had a hand in negotiating the media rights deal and the advertising for the broadcast. So let's dive into unpacking CAA Sports, shall we? And we're going to do this with a gentleman that I personally have enjoyed watching over all these many years from a front row seat. Ladies and gentlemen, Howie Nuchow. Welcome, Howie.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Ron, so much. And before we even get started, I'd love to say it's absolutely an honor to be here. As you well know, dating back to when the Sports Forum was just a startup, I sat in a chair, or we didn't have video at the time, but I sat in a chair with only a few of us as you were making your way in the business. And it was always a dream if you could go from this chair to one day be on the stage, like that almost seemed too much to dream. So it really is my honor to be there. And for everybody else who's listening, like I've been in that chair myself, and I was so excited to learn from the people you put up there. So congratulations to you. You are the furthest thing from a startup, and it's been also amazing to see what you've accomplished. And I've loved seeing the executives that have come through your program and have worked for you over the years.
Well, Howie, I've got to say that it's unfair because you don't look any older, but I've certainly have aged horribly in the now 27 years since we started then. But seriously, on point here. I just explained a little bit to everybody about CAA Sports. How do you describe CAA Sports to outsiders?
Well, it's a great question. You stole most of my lines. There's the way I'd explain it to my parents, which is very quick because I know they only would understand a couple of lines. But you touched on a lot of it, but we're a global sports enterprise composed of 19 different divisions. Those include athlete rep that you mentioned. We represent over 2,000 of the world's best athletes, coaches, and sports broadcasters. We're in property sales and sponsorship, where we represent some of the top properties like Formula One, the LA Clippers new arena, Riot Games, Red Bull Racing in their naming rights and their sponsorship transactions. It leads on to media rights, where we advise teams and leagues like the SEC, NHL, WWE, amongst others, on their broadcast rights. We have brand consulting divisions where we create marketing solutions for corporate brands. We have an executive search group that helps build leadership teams for teams, leagues, corporations, all through executive search and hiring executives. And we launched this company 15 years ago. And today we have more than 650 agents and executives operating in 5 continents. And went from a startup to orchestrating more than $100 billion in client revenue generating transactions. So we consider ourselves uh, very proudly a services group for teams, leagues, governing bodies, and corporations. So we provide advisory services and sales services. So we're very proud of that.
And well, you should be. We're going to dive into some of the bigger divisions. I'm going to ask you to kind of take us behind the ropes a little bit with some of them, but I can't help but think it's now 15 years, if my math is correct,
Yeah,
of
15
CAA
years.
sports.
Yes, yes.
I mean, the narrative certainly changes every day in our industry, but if you'd had a crystal ball, let's go back in time and try to forecast, when you first agreed to help launch CAA sports, what were your thoughts? What you thought you'd be getting into back then, and how has it evolved?
Well, it's interesting because through, and I mean this very sincerely, through conferences like yours, I was able to establish a network of people that really helped enlighten me on many different things that went on as I was growing up through ticket sales in
Yeah.
the industry. So started in the ticket sales business and wound up going to Mandalay Sports, fortunately working for a really big thinker in Peter Guber. I was lucky enough to have John Spolstra as my mentor at the New Jersey Nets. And then through your conference, meeting people like Tom Glick and Chad Estes and Steve Griggs, all people that are performing big in the industry right now. I was able to learn about different industries. And I also met somebody named Michael Levine, who is presently my partner, and also David Rohn at the time. And Mike Levine was working in the agency business in a previous life when SFX was rolling up different companies. And I was always fascinated with IMG. And I loved hearing stories about how they first really, Mark McCormick invented the business. So people like Bob Kane, Andy Pierce, and a lot of the older generation of IMG, hearing their stories really prepared for the question you asked, which is if I had a crystal ball. So I mentioned all of those names because when I read in the Sports Business Journal, I know long supporters of your conference, but I read in the Sports Business Journal that CA was forming. I had just met with a bunch of different people from IMG, hearing their old stories, and I just started to write what I thought the business could evolve into. We were coming off, I don't want to say failed, but roll-ups that didn't in the agency business that didn't end up being uh, operationally sound companies. It was a great stock play. They all did very well, but those companies were rolling up agencies, and I didn't think it was built for the future. So when I say a crystal ball, I kind of took their crystal ball and answered the question and said, if you could do it again, what type of people would you gather? I had just been at Mandalay, and we had met with a ton of different agents, and I realized not all of them can work together. You have to have a philosophy, a culture. They have to be part of being for the greater good. It didn't make them not a talented agent if they didn't fit into that mix. Some of the most talented might not fit into that mix. But I always thought if you could gather that up, become the best agents in the world, you'd have a platform to build all these other businesses off of. And so when you say on a crystal ball, I really think we got a lot of things right. I think we did gather that up. I think it was really about the people we were gathering that bought into this vision. and then gathering up a whole other side of the business that said, if we become the best in the world at representing athletes, we thought our brand, people would start to trust us a bit more. And if everybody else we rolled into that office was talented and lived up to a good reputation and could help grow revenues of whether it was a league, a property, a corporation, good things would happen. So in hindsight, I think we got that right. If you said to me years ago, would we be in executive search? I probably wouldn't have guessed that. But we really thought it would start with being great agents, lead into consulting, be the best in the world at media, be the best in the world at sales. And that started our plan. And now it's led to a whole lot more. But in hindsight, we got that right. But I also feel like we're just getting started.
Oh, that's great. I mean, we're going to do this again another 15 years, my friend.
It would be
But
great.
but no, let's rewind it back to the beginning. I mean, obviously, and you stated it just a second ago. Obviously, when you guys first got involved into sports, as I mentioned in my introduction about the interlocking facets and the different departments of CAA sports. But really, the first one, I think the very first department you had, and certainly what people maybe most know you for, is the player and coach representation. So you touched on a little bit. I want to go into some of your main divisions and just kind of get your thoughts about what you're doing and where it's going. So let's start with player and coach representation.
Okay. That started, we were very fortunate way back, in 07 to have a group of agents from IMG join us. Tom Condon, who I think is the greatest agent of our generation, joined us in football. We had an entire group of baseball agents that joined us from IMG. And we were able to start and have something to talk about. And then very quickly after that, Pat Brisson joined us from IMG in the hockey group. And very soon after we started, all three of those things happened right before we started in 06. And in 07, my partners, who I mentioned, Mike Levine, David Rohn, and myself started to help build that out. And one of the first things we did was have Leon Rose join, who was representing a young client named LeBron James at the time. So that was helpful. So all of a sudden we had a group day one with all of those stars, with Sidney Crosby, LeBron James, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. And so we were starting, but we also had a group of people that were willing to give to the greater good. And what I mean by that is none of them, we got rid of formulas where a lot of agents are elbows up and they think, okay, nobody can talk to my client. And that was really, even when SFX was going, and this is what really stuck in my head, when SFX was rolling things up, they had what's called earnouts, formulas that when somebody bought a company. And well, those agents were incredibly talented, some of the best to ever do it. When you have formulas that say, if that is yours, you get paid X, I don't know how to make that work, because you are naturally, you could be the nicest person in the world, but if you are by design paid for not looking for the greater good. And so what I'm most proud about is those agents that joined us in the beginning gave up those formulas and trusted that we would do the right things by them if they contributed to the greater good. And it's no different 15 years later. And so we owe a lot to all of those people that, one, allowed us to, when we had nothing, really leverage their names and their business and their clients to grow, but they also made the ultimate sacrifice and joined in a philosophy. And it was our job to make it work for them, to reward the assist, to make sure they didn't get paid any less by doing it this way. And that got people to buy in. And also, to be honest, as leaders, not to be a threat to their business. They were the best in the world at what they did. So our jobs were, and I was just coming off running 7 minor league baseball teams for Mandalay, in which they had team presidents at each one of those teams. So I understood as a corporate person, the last thing you want to do is be in the way where they live there 365 days a year, and they might resent that here you are coming in to visit your 25 days a year into their team, telling them what to do. And so there's a balance there. And fortunately, I think we struck that really well, and we were able to expand into other areas. Whether we learned in the tennis business, we didn't love the individual sport representation business. It just wasn't the same as team sports. And so we're not really in golf and tennis on an individual, but we also learned we want to be in those industries. So we represent brands in the golf business. So we'll probably touch on that later, but that was the biggest thing that started our company, and what I think we're most proud of the employees that were here giving to the company and believing that their efforts will be rewarded. I think that's what's attracted over the last 15 years all this other great talent that we've been able to gather up.
Well, I think as an outsider's point of view, when I first heard about what you were going to be doing, and I love the expression used, agents are elbows up. They come into the room, elbows up. And I thought, man, you're never going to get this to work.
You weren't the only one.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, how you can't get these guys to give that up. That's what they're used to, but you have done it. You said it earlier, and I want to get back on it. 2,000 athletes, and now even coaches, broadcasters, sports personalities, and not only covering the traditional sports, but you mentioned earlier combat sports, F1 drivers, Peloton coaches, esports reps, Riot Games, and Valorant. On the sales side, I mean, this is amazing. Started maybe with athletes, and then just quickly grew from the traditional sports, and just quickly grew.
Well, some of that is keeping your eyes open to be opportunistic, and everything is a platform. By doing what we talked about, we were able to entice one of the greats, Jimmy Sexton, to join the company. And all of a sudden, he had a nice coaches business, and he had a lot of different coaches all in the Power 5 conferences in football. But you realize his talents don't begin and end there. If he could do it in football, he could do it in basketball, and he could do it all over, and he could train a whole group of young people to also do it so we can expand further. So again, when we say all credit is due back to these employees that have joined, given of themselves for the greater good, because again, on the elbows up, what if Jimmy decided to keep his entire network his? But he's helping 22 to 30-year-olds all get their network and sharing his. So if you can reward that, then great things happen. You become a place that people want, but you're keeping your eye out the whole time. Peter Guber had an incredible phrase that was, so what, now what? So we're great at football. Now what else can you do? So we're the world's leading athlete rep firm in the 4 major sports. Now what can you do? Else can you do? So it forces you to think beyond just your success of today. And that's what led us into the areas. And thankfully, we have enough smart people and young people and veterans all around thinking, hey, esports is next. If we represent people here, why are we not representing sports broadcasters? But then the same thing goes. Who are the people that you can get in those spaces? Not the person with the biggest client list, but who's the best human being that you can roll into your company that think will join into that culture, and the whole thing will make them the best version of themselves.
Interesting. That's fascinating. And then I'm going to dovetail that in, because obviously it's not a natural jump. Usually agents are usually on the other side of the table from owners. Agents are on one side, and then the ownership and management is on the other side. But CAA then did the jump, which is even harder to believe, to now start working with owners on things like property sales representation. So, you grow beyond athlete representation on into, I want to say, I believe you started with Madison Square Garden and Yankee Stadium, but then you branched into, obviously, property sales representation across the board. So tell us a little bit about how that started and where it's at now.
Well, it's a similar philosophy of, we started with what we knew, which fortunately in the very early days, myself, Michael Levine, Paul Danforth, who was the first person who joined us basically 2 weeks after we joined. We had thought we need to be the best in sales in the world, and Paul and Vino would be an incredible combination to do so. And again, just like agents, then they were going to teach a whole bunch of young people how to do it like they did. But we started with what we knew, which was the New York Yankees, and we were fortunately hired by Randy Levine and Lon Trost and the staff there, Michael Tusiani, who allowed us to work with them to sell Yankee Stadium, the brand new Yankee Stadium. So early, we got a big win. And I think it was great because people like Tusiani realized, wow, it could be really helpful to have some extra firepower. It's not like we did it without the Yankees. We did it in partnership with all of them. I mean, they made the final calls, but I think we did a great job there. And what that led to was then a call from another friend of Scott O'Neill, who was at the Madison Square Garden. We were able to be part of successfully selling that building. And so it led to that philosophy of, so what, now what? So you've done a lot of dollars for the Yankees in Madison Square Garden. You realize you could sell a lot of these pristine, high-end properties. What else is next? And so, again, I forget who did it, but it was somebody on our sales staff that started talking about people like Riot Games and Formula One racing. This is obviously over the years. That wasn't in 2007. But when you ask, how do we get in these properties? It's as his sales staff talking, okay, so what's next? Where else can we put these resources and how best can we serve them? So if we have an international Rolodex that we'd like to believe is second to none, who could benefit from that? Who can you really look in the eye and say, we really can move the needle for you? And we took real good bets on Formula One and Riot Games when people really didn't know what those companies were about, but we believed in their management and their place in the sports world. And while Riot Games might have been dominating esports, it wasn't so acceptable that sponsors all over the globe would think of it, but they're an incredibly well-run property. Their longevity has been awesome. And we believe the same thing about properties like F1. And that's led us into not only doing F1, but looking at some of the teams within F1, like Red Bull Racing, where we sell hundreds of millions of dollars of sponsorships for them too. And so that so what, now what philosophy has really taught us to keep it.
Oh, I'm sorry, please continue.
I was to say, and to listen to everybody in the organization who might have an idea. The best ideas are usually not from the top. You know, you have to be aware enough to hear a good one and credit the people that have done it. And so I think our staff has been the best hunters for us as a company, like some of the younger people.
Well, I think that touches a little bit, Howie, on the different philosophies and why CAA Sports managed to be so successful. There are a number of organizations where, counter to your point just now, you said, well, the best ideas don't always come from the top. I know there are organizations where, you know, the bosses will say, if it was a good idea, I would have come up with it, you know, and they don't listen to their people. So the fact that you're so willing to listen to the folks that work, you know, and look to cultivate that next idea, I think that's a credit.
Yeah, I think that's systemic in the entire organization. And we joined the company in CA, you mentioned at the top, that was very dominant in the entertainment space. I know you have a long association with Rob Light dating back to college, who's our head of music, and Richard Lovett and Brian Lord and Kevin Uvain, and the people that have run this company for 20, 30 years, I think 30 years. And it's systemic to how to listen. And it's systemic where they were dominant, but they act like they're in fifth place. And that was the thing that was most enticing back in 2007 was you talk to these people who are at the top of their game, but they were definitely operating paranoid as if it could all end tomorrow. And I found that super motivating. And so did my partners. And I think systemically, Mike Levine and Paul Danforth and a lot of the other people, we had mentors that taught the exact opposite philosophy of it must be created here. So fortunately, you know, the mentorship provided. If you work for somebody like that, that's no fun.
No, I think it's great. But I'm going to jump back into having you give us your thoughts on some of the bigger divisions at CAA Sports, and we're going to obviously go from property sales representation on into brand consulting. And maybe that might have been a natural next step, but certainly I would rather hear that from you. How did you get into brand consulting then?
Well, what you want to do, some of the goal, and I think we're also very proud. I forget which magazine named us the most influential uh, company in sports, and another said we have, I think it was the fifth most influential brand in the world. So up there with Coca-Cola and Nike.
Okay.
And so where that comes from is you want to have the most data. And if you're going to have the most data, you should be in a bunch of industries that might help support each other. So if the property sales group are selling some of the largest deals in the world, they're very aware of after that's sold, you have to activate those deals. And so now, just like everything else, if you're going to put somebody in the room with your biggest clients to say, we can help activate these deals for you also, you better put the best in the world in there. And so we have four leaders of our consulting group, two great women and two great men that share leadership in that division. Paul Danforth still oversees it because we saw that connection between our major sales and then a lot of common networks involved. So on being on all sides, and sometimes the property sales might come because we're representing a brand and it might make sense for that brand, like in the case of the Golden State Warriors, which was an incredible, I thought, one of our proudest moments where we were on both sides of the table representing Chase Bank as on the consulting side because they wanted to have a big presence in San Francisco. We happened to be representing the Golden State Warriors in selling that property. And both sides had to trust that we would do right by them. And it's such a credit. I mean, I love that organization. They're so well run. They have incredible ownership. And Rick Welts is, we had this conversation about this exact thing. And for him to trust, and same thing, by the way, for Chase Bank, they were incredible during this process to say, I think you're all going to represent us well, and you're going to do the right thing because there would be nothing worse for us than to lose our credibility and thinking we'd have competing agendas that would hurt each other. And so to come out of that deal where Chase Bank buys from, again, we assist the Golden State Warriors. We're not selling it where they're not in the room. That's just not how this works. They're in the room making final decisions, and we're helping give our advice there, calling on some of these accounts. But to have our advisors in the room on both sides and come away with the deal that happened that everybody's happy with is amongst the most proud moments I think I've had at the company.
It's the most incredible moments. I mean, you have just told us that you were involved on both the buy side and the sell side at the same time.
Yes.
I mean, that's unprecedented as far as I know.
It certainly took organizations. It's happened a few times since but I think because that experience was so well and so rewarding for each side and so trusting, I don't think you could get a higher compliment than coming out of that and people trusting. So, but it took a special organization to do that first, and Rick and Peter and Joe and that crew were incredible, plus their staff there.
I think it's awesome. Well, congratulations on that. I mean, again, now, what's next really kind of leads into my next thing, starting a sports media advisory division, if you would. You have advised on and helped negotiate the media rights for such well-known sports as the PGA, the SEC, the NHL. You mentioned it earlier, WWE, Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball. How did that all launch in?
So that was also in when you said in the original, is it what we thought we would be when we originally wrote our first business plan in 2007 after becoming, the top in athlete rep. What divisions did we want to start? We said consulting, property sales, and media. And it was really important because I think those areas are so important to owners of teams, leagues, governing bodies. So if you could be relied on in those areas, good things are going to happen. So same position. We wanted to get the best in the world that we think that we could find out there. We found Alan Gold, who runs our media group. He has two incredible people alongside him with Carolyn Rubello and Fabian. I always butcher his last name, but Fabian Stechel. And all of those things, we thought if our credibility amongst all these groups can be, if we can be talking to the leadership at ESPN, we can talk to the leadership at NBC Sports, talk to the leadership at on and on and on, CBS. If they're reliant on us to help on either side of the table, because a lot of times sometimes we're working for and a lot of times against, sitting in those rooms with the major media companies. But it's all about having the most amount of data. And because I think we represent the biggest properties, we have some pattern recognition of what works for people, and we have trust in all of those different entities that we talked about. And that's the common theme. I keep saying, if we are just people who are going to break glass, just try to get the highest price and not care about what the process was, I don't think we'd be in business very long. Certainly not having the 15-year run that I do hope we get to 30 so we can revisit you there. But it all does begin and end with how much integrity can you have at the end of these deals while getting your client a number that they think is great. And other people don't. It doesn't mean you can't have a successful company operating differently and scorch some earth and beat some people up. It's just not our philosophy. And you can get there both ways, but we kind of have one way to do it. And unfortunately, it's been very successful and leads to a lot of referrals, but it also is just a natural expansion of serving our clients in the best way we can to get them the most amount of revenues. And that is honest. That is the theme on how the company is built.
Oh, I love it. But it does put you, the media advisory puts you in a perfect position, vantage point, to weigh in on where you see the future of rights deals going. I'd love to pick your brain on, there's the traditional avenues now like CBS and ESPN, or some of the newcomers like Amazon or Peacock. I mean, where do you see the future rights going here?
Well, I think it's an incredible time to be in the business, because I laugh when people are saying, "Oh, the traditional media people, they'll go by the wayside." It's the furthest thing that's going to happen. In fact, there's traditional media, and then there's the tech side, and call them digital first. But the traditional media has just launched a lot of different streaming services. They all have one, I think, except Fox. And every one of them needs content right now to validate that streaming platform. So the traditional companies are being incredibly aggressive and defending, if you don't evolve, you'll perish. And just like us, like we operate paranoid that no matter how well we're doing, this could be the last day if the business changes in a blink. And the traditional media companies are scooping up the biggest and best rights. And I think they're operating, as aggressive as possibly can. So it's the furthest thing from the truth that traditional media is going to be stepping back. Now, the tech companies, they're being smart. They will be around. They're starting to dip their toes in the water. You watch different deals happening, whether it's Amazon took a little small Premier League package, or then did a big thing with the NFL. And typically when you do $1 billion NFL deal, that's not the last thing you're going to do, but they're big enough and strong enough to be strategic, and they're smart enough. And Apple is doing a few things, I think 50 games maybe with Major League Baseball. And so they're dipping their toe in, and they're not doing that to not do more deals. So, but it's not like they're just pushing the traditional companies out of the way. So it's a good time to be in the space, because all of this disruption is, to me, it's always a positive. And following the flow of how things work, you need to be a step or two ahead. And that goes again to the concept of the company, that we're involved in so many different areas, talking to all different, people, stakeholders in this, that it's beneficial to be the service providers that we are right now. So we're big believers in, then you get to the Netflix of the world. I think I believe, that, and so do I think a lot of people within our shop, that they will get into the live rights at some point, because the ones that are working right now all have live rights, and they are very smart company. They have a couple of other plays going on with games, and maybe that'll work, and they might not have to be in it, but it's definitely going to be on the so what, now what philosophy. They're watching it smartly, just like Amazon, Apple. They went in first, but then you have Google and Facebook and YouTube, which might take a little longer because they're not just the streaming. They have different revenue streams than just this. So while they're kind of dipped their toe in, I think they kind of felt like, all right, we don't need to do this yet, but the world will evolve over the next 2, 3, 4 years, or 30 days. So i think I think everybody's a player right now. Traditional media is going nowhere. They're only getting smarter. They're only scooping up more rights. Tech is in the waiting. They're being very smart, dipping their toe in, seeing how it goes, and when they come in, great also. So I think it's a good time. Like, content is only getting stronger and stronger, which is continues to be great for the industry.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Netflix, and certainly what you just said about content being king, if you would. With Netflix, obviously, what they were able to accomplish with the F1 Drive to Survive
Yes.
series,
Mm-hmm.
and what that has meant to F1 here in the United States. I know you're involved in F1. I know you just came back from Miami a couple of weeks ago. That whole storytelling, not just broadcasting the event, but actually telling the whole story behind it. Just incredible what it's been able to accomplish for a sport.
Yes. I mean, for years, we've all grown up. We've heard about F1, might turn on a race for a couple of minutes, not fully engage. And that show, I mean, it's no different if you're sitting on the couch and you tell whoever's sitting next to you, like, that person just broke their leg. They're coming back. It's their first game back. They thought they'd never walk again. You're just glued to it. I think the F1 team that put that together, it's changed everything. I know when I was walking around there, and special congratulations to Tom Garfinkel and Steve Ross. It was amongst the coolest events I've seen. But even added, not only did they operate it, I thought, really well, and again, they got so much more right than you do wrong on a first time event. That's almost impossible to do. It just made you so excited for what the future is, where I didn't think I'd be dying to go to a race every year. And now after watching that series, I can't get enough of it. When you're walking around and those figures are coming to life. And again, we work with Red Bull. So I've known Christian Horner a long time, like our team, but now I look at him like he's a superstar celebrity. And because he's such a great person or character on that show, and it's all very authentic. And I do think that'll be great for sports. I do think people try to replicate it. It's not easy. It's kind of like if you made a hit movie, you're like, just make another hit movie. It's
Yeah.
not so easy to go do. But F1 as an organization, the access they provided, the filmmakers that are allowing this controversy to be shown, is like, when there's rivals, and nothing better than the rivalries up there in Formula One at the top. It's just really, really, really neat. And I left because our staff has been going to these events well before Drive to Survive, and now everybody's joining them. And we've all been there, like, okay, now you all want to come here, and you're like, we were storming the beach first. And so a little credit, shout out to the team at CA that's been going to races in a lot of different countries for a lot of different years.
Man. I think that's great. Well, I want to make sure that I don't forget one of the major divisions, and probably one of the newest ones, because this one definitely bears some exploration, and that's CAA's owner representation division, which is better known as CAA Icon. So founded in 2016. They've been.
They were in existence. We bought them in 2016. And so, sorry. I mean, that was another example on the so what, now what. So we have all these great relationships. what else can we do? And we had known Tim Romani way back for 20 years, had always considered Tim and CA Icon amongst the best in the world at what they did. If not, we considered them the market leader and thought if we could ever do something. I had met Tim when I was in Las Vegas when I was doing minor league baseball there, and we tried to get a stadium built in Las Vegas unsuccessfully. So whoever did that recently, congratulations, because we weren't able to get it done. But I really hit it off with Tim, and I thought he was incredible with the mayor. I was in a meeting there and watching him do that and the relationships he had with Major League Baseball itself. We were like, if you could get the market leader, your relationships continue to expand. It's a really important thing because owners are great at a lot of things, but sometimes building a stadium, you don't know how that works, how the economics of the steel company and it's like building a house. You might be really smart at your day job, but you don't know what to protect yourself if you were building a house somewhere, who was taking out of what pocket. And to have a crew that owners and again governing bodies and leagues can rely on in the way and have the great credibility and just another resource that the company has that can make everybody else look good. We just finished a project here in Nashville where I just recently moved to, and it's amazing to be able to come to town and have the owner, John Ingram, who's a very influential person with town, be so satisfied with what your company's work just was. And so it's another way where not only is the work great, but it leads to other things when you can deliver something that's really scary to a lot of folks and get it right. And so they finished the Las Vegas arena. I know they worked on Golden State. They were in there after somebody else was in there, but super proud of that arena and who is about to go host some fun games in the next couple of
I was going to say,
days.
but I mean, again, your fingerprints are on Allegiant Stadium. You mentioned Chase Center, the expansion at Wrigley Field, Q2 Arena in London. I mean, some major, major facility. Like I said in the beginning, if you're at the game, chances are you might be in a building that CA Sports had one of many different levels of involvement.
That part has gotten fun when you watch sports on TV and you try not to blurt it out loud where you're saying, well, we represent that person or we built that stadium, because your friends don't care, but it is a fun thing amongst us all to be very proud of what we built and also as proud of how many different people contribute to making those things happen. But as you also talked, when we do the So What Now, so we built a lot of things, and Tim and his team's reputation was so strong domestically here. It led us to think, okay, and then now what? Hopefully there'll be a stadium boom that we could be a part of in Europe. And so we moved people out to Europe out there, and I think you'll see a lot of traction for us out building internationally now.
Well, that's a great segue into CAA's growth internationally. Again, CAA Sports' business growth overseas, UEFA base, soccer. I mean, just one of many things that you got. Formula One that you're involved in. That wasn't there, obviously, when you started. I don't even know if it was in your crystal ball initially. I'm sure it was, but I mean, where it's actually grown now so far beyond the borders of North America, internationally, what's next on that front?
Well, we always knew we wanted to go international, but we just didn't know exactly how. And what we realized was if we can replicate the success we've had here internationally, we should start that way. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We always knew we wanted to be very strong in international soccer. So very early on, we were running tours here in the United States and learned a ton, hosting games with Inter Milan and AC Milan and Barcelona and Real Madrid. And we got to learn who the different people that were making the most, had the most sway in international soccer. We learned what we liked and didn't like. So before we dipped our toe in the water, we were dipped our toe in the water doing that. But before we went in heavy, we got to really make some mistakes, bet on some of the wrong people, learned what we thought might be a good idea. And it led us to really wanting to work with some of the powerful governing bodies. And so there's FIFA, who runs the World Cup, and UEFA, that has the Euro Championships. And they, for the first time, UEFA was centralizing all of the rights. They used to farm out the rights to, if you were London, you own the rights to your own country's games in the Euro Championships. And they were centralizing it. So they thought maybe if we could sell that much money, we could divvy it out to our federations, because that's how the federations survive. And if we could centralize it all, that might work. And it was a huge, huge undertaking by UEFA. And we were very fortunate. We thought that's our opportunity to hit the international scene. And fortunately, we won that bid by partnering with UEFA. And now we sell to every country in the world, and it's billions of dollars for this it's not one competition anymore. The rights we have expanded, but every game in the Euro is a larger audience than the Super Bowl. And it was incredible to learn that and the power of that. And we've been able to renew for another 2 cycles. That's another 8 years. So we feel great about our reputations with UEFA and the governing body that governs soccer all over Europe. And so, again, you see the theme is, if you can get yourself in there to do something, but do it great and get people to trust you, because that's been, everybody's read about the different articles of things that haven't gone well in international soccer, but we found UEFA to be, they have a new president there. We find to be really, really a stand-up person. We love the board that we serve on there. We go there 4 times a year to go over, and we have 40 people in Switzerland selling all over the globe. And so it's that's where it started, and that got us a foothold there. And then we moved a lot of the people that were succeeding here out to London. The office is run by a guy named Matt O'Donohoe, and he's done a great job replicating what we've done in representing athletes, property sales, consulting. And so we're doing a lot of replicating of what worked, and fortunately finding a lot of success out there too.
I love it. Well, I want to ask, because we've got about, maybe 15 minutes left here. I want to kind of take it from focus on CAA to really kind of a focus on you, Howie. And like I said, I've had the opportunity to have been your friend for a long, long time. But the first question I want to ask is, just looking at the headlines now, what are you paying attention to, Howie, in the sports industry right now?
Well, obviously, fortunately, I'm somebody that has to work at a company, because if it was just me, we wouldn't get too far. So fortunately, we have a crew of people in the company looking into the metaverse and crypto and Bitcoin and exchanges and learning, making sure we are up to speed. As service providers, we have to be the experts at everything. So you don't get the luxury of sitting back and saying, okay, we'll wait and learn about these things at some other time, because your clients are expecting you to be experts. So we have groups of people, teams of people all over the agency studying what's working and not working in those areas. So whether it's NFTs or the metaverse, which, I've been at hearing different board members and very influential people talk about that the metaverse will be as big as cable was. And so understanding that early, and it's a great opportunity for young people, because you could quickly become the expert. And, while nobody is the expert right now, you could quickly become very knowledgeable and really help yourself in the work world by becoming a little more advanced than somebody else, as these rules will keep changing. Obviously, the nil space, paying attention, because something's got to change. I mean, it's the Wild West, and we're waiting for those rules. The more strict the rules are, the better it is, I think, for companies like ours that try to operate within all of those lines. And when people don't understand what the rules really are, because there's different jurisdictions, and it's hard, and you see everybody struggling with it. It's nobody's fault, but I think athletes are struggling with it, trying to make sense of it. Schools, coaches right now are really in a tough position. And so in that case, we're not at the forefront as much as we're selling what we think you're supposed to sell and doing that for our clients and doing it at a very high level. But I do think the rules are going to change there. And so certainly watching that happen.
Does CAA represent both the college athletes out there on the NIL as
We
well as corporate sponsors?
So far, we've really just done it on the college athlete side,
Okay.
and some of the higher end players that we think can earn a good chunk, which they've done great at, and that's awesome for these kids. At the same time, the rules are very haphazard, but at least if somebody's benefiting right now, it's these kids. So it's causing a lot of mayhem within the industry. So I'd rather see these young men and women make the money as we figure it out than so it's nice while we're waiting.
Well, and speaking of young people coming into the industry, it's a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. It's like oftentimes, and I believe you're a believer that sometimes some of the best leaders are often mentors. And that said, you touched on it a little bit, but your mentors, Howie, and how does somebody go about finding a mentor, and how does somebody get Howie as a mentor?
It's such a great question because my heart will race thinking if I never met John Spolstra or Peter Guber, and that I was so fortunate in my life that I had people who cared, and I had what we call champions. And I'm always telling young people, find your champion, and it has to be authentic. And if you don't have a champion, you can't stay with that person that long. You can glean and get some help from, take what you can, but you can't stay there that long for somebody that you don't think wants something good for you. And in both cases for me, I think both people wanted something great for me. I'm not foolish enough to think that was just because they thought I was a good person. Like they were getting something back, and so you have to give something back. If John Spolstra gave me a book to read, I had to make sure I read it cover to cover, because then he was gonna spend 2 hours with me over chicken wings and beer talking about the book. And if I didn't give that back, I didn't make that time useful for him, he would have stopped spending any time with me. And it's same thing with Richard Lovett, who bet on a couple of us to help build a company and gave us any time we needed. If we didn't reward that with whether it's loyalty or effort, and loyalty doesn't always mean you just have to stay with someone the rest of your life, but you owe them the honest effort, you owe them honesty, you owe them, coming in and trying to be better every day. And that's what mentors want. They want to see that there is a reward for everybody. Always says it's selfless. I don't believe it's totally selfless, because what you get out of it is you want to feel good about the time and effort you're putting into a young person. And that is your reward. So if you're not getting it, you will move away. So it's not just 100%. So what you want to do is just reward those people. When you have a good one, stay there as long as you can, because there's nothing like having somebody that wants something good to happen for you, and reward it. And in return, they're supposed to help you move along, whether it's with you or with somebody else. And so I that's as much as I can guess why people mentor other people. And I think there's a lot of good people in the world that want to give back to young people because they had it done to them.
Well, and of course, these are individuals, Peter Guber, John Spolstra, amazing people that wanted to see you succeed. They were there in your corner and they were coaching you. And maybe not always the easiest to find, but I think one of the things, Howie, that you've always been open to networking, communicating, and you always lead with how can I help you? And that seems very sincere and genuine. So I don't know where you learned that. Probably you were raised that way, but you have definitely a look like not what's in it for me, but what's in it for you. You've always taken a great interest in all the people you've talked
Well, I
to.
think people, it's repelling to be the other way. You'd be like a repellent. And the second somebody just wants something, and again, there are plenty of people that operate that way and are successful, but are you happily successful? And So while some, and you know who they are when they're coming, you're like, okay, he might get me this or she might get me this, but this is transactional.
Mm.
Some people are very successful transactionally. It's just not. And you're right. I don't know the answer, but it probably was how I was raised, but also who I surrounded myself with. Like all those people I met at the forum that I mentioned in the beginning, and yourself included. Like I think stay together because that's kind of a common bond. And we haven't allowed that other, we all have transactional people in our life, but you know what box to put them in. And that's okay too. It only hurts when you don't have them in the right box and you expect more than that. But the people we are the closest with, I believe, behave in the way you describe.
Well, I'm going to kind of close with one more question here. Uh, if I'm out there and I'm watching this and going, damn, someday I want to be Howie Nuchow, what would be the best piece of advice that you would give to anyone, that anyone ever gave to you on your way up?
Well, considering I sat in that chair, in the National Sports Forum, listening to speakers going, gosh, I really, really just hope I could be a, any part of what they are. If I can only measure a tiny bit, that would feel great. So I like that exercise. The best advice I got, I was actually really young because, I'm a big thinker and I chase a lot of butterflies and I'm always off to the next thing. Was somebody just stopped as I had just started with the New Jersey Nets, and all of a sudden the Knicks called, and the Knicks were the bigger team in town. The Nets had a long road ahead of them. I was selling tickets, and tickets at that time was the lowest rung on the totem pole. And I got a call to sell radio sponsorships for the Knicks and the Rangers and Madison Square Garden. I thought, I got to leave and go do that. So I went to go see somebody. And what's funny is this person who wasn't a long-term player in my life. I just got very lucky that was somebody I spoke to this day. I said, "Hey, I got this job, but I think I'm going to go leave and go to the Knicks and Rangers. It's much cooler than what I'm doing right now." He said, "How long have you been there?" I said, "I don't know, 4 months." He said, "Are you graded anything yet?" I'm like, "Not really. I just got there." He's like, be great at something and then leave. He's like, that'll at least, or think of leaving them, but be great at something. And those words really struck at me, saying, I'm chasing a butterfly to go do not, I hadn't even succeeded yet. So what is that going to say about me? So I decided then and there, I have this opportunity with John Spolster, one of the great teachers of our time. Let me go try to be great at ticket sales and let me put all of my effort into that. And I didn't know where it would lead to, but it's led to everything I've ever accomplished in my entire life. And so I'm not saying everybody has to start in ticket sales, but whatever you do, just try to be great at that one thing. And to me, that's what got me noticed the most as I grew up. And really, my partner likes to say, and reward the assist. Always when you want to do that, be around you, thank people that are contributing to your life, and good things will happen. So over reward the assist. So
Now,
those are the two things that
I was going to ask, will there be a book before you retire? Will you ever sit down and maybe, you look at John Spolster, he's written down some great memories, Peter Guber, will there be a book in the future?
I don't
Some of
know.
your memories and advice.
I think so. For right now, I'm just having a lot of fun talking in forums like this, which really is. Each time I do one, more stuff comes back to me.
Yeah.
When I was sitting in those chairs, I was super young, wide-eyed, and all this. I can't believe I'm talking the way I talk right now, as if all that time has passed, and I'm no longer that the youngest one in the room. I'm now the oldest one in the room, and so I'm just having fun building this company still and going down memory lane for the greater good, though. I really
You
appreciate
have
you giving me this
absolutely.
forum because, again, if it helps anybody that's watching in this, it would give me the greatest of joy. Like, I mean, again, there were a million people. Our relationship started because you wrote me a letter because you read
Yep.
about something, and that's over 30 years ago. And we've been talking, for the better part of 30 years. So
Well,
thank
there's
you.
one thing I've got to say in closing. Anybody who's watching this that's been to an NSF, to a National Sports Forum, you'll know that Howie is immortalized. In every opening that I ever do, I always use, and I credit you, Howie, for this. When we were trying to put something together like the National Sports Forum, and for anybody who's watched the last hour here, you'll know why. This is the way Howie's wired. But he one time said to me, about the forum, that our unofficial motto is "Friends don't let friends stay unemployed." And I can't tell you, Howie, how many people come up to me during the conference, because I always say, as Howie Nuchow one time taught me, this is our whole motto here: it's "Friends don't let friends stay unemployed." And I said, I can't tell you how many people always come up to me during the forum going, "God, when you said that, it was like boom." It's just like my eyes opened up, and it's like, really, you got to be there for each other. And you have done that not only for the industry, you've done that for me personally. You've done that for your mentors because, givers get, but you've certainly done that for CAA sports. So just, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, and just, I'm so pleased and proud of just watching the work you have done. And I know you aren't near done yet, my friend. So I'm going to be looking forward to that next interview. And so thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
You got it. Congratulations on everything you've done. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to do this.
We appreciate that. And everybody, coming up next will be our Crystal Ball Super Panel. So get yourself a hot cup of coffee. Come back and join us. And if you've enjoyed this, please let us know. And again, we thank you so much, Howie, and we wish you all the best. Take care now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.